story this evening. India and the US termed their first in-person talks since the 50% tariff levy as positive. US top negotiator Brendan Lynch met Rajesh Agrawal, India's chief negotiator, in New Delhi. The meeting comes at the back of President Trump resorting to a more conciliatory stance amidst the tariff standoff with India. A statement by the Commerce Ministry called the discussion positive and forward-looking. It added that the talks covered various aspects of the trade deal. The statement also added that the two countries have decided to intensify efforts to achieve an early conclusion of the trade negotiations. Meanwhile, the US Embassy confirmed to CNBC-TV18 that Lynch's meeting was positive and focused on the next steps in the negotiation. Joining us now is Mark Linscott, former Assistant US Trade Representative and Senior Advisor, USISPF. Thank you very much, Mark Linscott, for joining us. How would you see these negotiations that have taken place in person after almost 2 months? The last in-person round was on the 17th of July, and since then there has been a lot of acrimony. Do you think this is a step forward?
Well, thanks for having me, Parikshit. It's always a pleasure to see you. It's definitely a step forward. It's hard to imagine any scenario in which they could have gone further backwards. They had dug quite a deep hole, and I think any effort to make some progress, to show some progress for the two sides to meet is welcome. Now, we don't know the details. I don't think there probably were many details. This is a process, and I expect we'll have negotiations continuing. But it's just very good that they've restarted on trade.
You know, what I would like to ask you, that the Indian Commerce Ministry has gone on to say that the discussions are positive and forward-looking, covering various aspects of the trade deal. It was decided to intensify efforts to achieve early conclusion of a mutually beneficial trade agreement. The US Embassy spokesperson in New Delhi has said the talks are positive and both sides have discussed future steps in the trade negotiations. You know, when you take a prima facie reading of these statements, what do you think is going to happen next now?
Well, intensification. I think that means that they will start scheduling the next trade negotiating rounds. You know, ever since July 30th, I think, when President Trump posted on Truth Social his comments on Indian purchases of Russian oil, there basically have been no trade negotiations. Those were put on hold as you know, there was consideration of the Russian oil situation. That's not yet resolved as far as I know, but the two sides have decided, let's get back to the table on the trade issues. We made a lot of progress before. We have a lot to work with, and let's see if we can ink a deal sooner than later. So it's definitely a positive development. I expect that we will soon hear of a next negotiating round, perhaps the Indian team being led by Rajesh Agrawal coming to Washington, perhaps Minister Goyal himself coming to Washington. We don't know those details yet, but I expect that's the next step.
Right. Mark, when we speak about the last set of negotiations that took place in person in July, by that period, it is now almost well known, and it is also reported widely, that both sides had almost arrived at a trade deal which was on President Trump's table. What do you think now needs to be done in terms of getting the contours right and making sure that politically both countries are aligned and the vision is aligned as well?
Well, I think a central issue that needs to be concluded, resolved, is what tariff rate is going to apply on both sides. And we've seen several different models of the trade deals that the Trump administration has concluded. We've seen the EU model. The EU remarkably agreed to eliminate its tariffs on all industrial goods for exports from the United States, and got a 15% tariff in exchange. That, you know, I spent much of my career negotiating with the European Union, and I never imagined a scenario like that. We have the Japanese model, again, at a 15% level for Japan. Importantly, some concessions on the tariffs associated with autos. But Japan did not appear to agree to eliminate all of its tariffs on industrial goods. It made some concessions on rice, but very limited from what I've seen, what I've heard from many experts. So, I think we can look at some of those models and begin to guess where things might come out on the tariff side. Agriculture clearly remains a challenging issue going forward. I imagine that any progress on the agriculture issues will involve some transitions. It won't be comprehensive market access. It's clear that India has a lot of sensitivities and is not prepared to fully open its agriculture market and would like to get some concessions in return in the U.S. agriculture market. So, I think that will be a big challenge to come. But, again, this is very positive news that they are moving ahead together now.
Right. I would also like to ask you that what would be the best case scenario in terms of tariffs? The U.S., we're told, has asked for 0 tariffs on American goods coming to India and a 10% tariff on Indian goods. India wants the tariff to be mutually acceptable, reciprocal, maybe at 10 to 13%. What do you think is the best case scenario?
Well, I think it's unlikely that there will be a agreement to basically a U.S. tariff of as low as 10%. There have only been a couple of instances, like the U.K., a country with which the United States has a trade surplus, that got a 10% rate. I think a good scenario would be in the range of 15%. Perhaps it could be lower, but I think that depends on what India can offer in exchange. Will it be eliminating tariffs across the board, which seems highly unlikely, even in the industrial area? I mean, there's going to have to be some give and take here, and I don't think they made progress on that. I'm assuming they didn't make progress on that. That's for negotiations to come. Again, Brendan Lynch was here. I know Brendan well. He was my former deputy at USTR. So, we've got the negotiations in good hands on both sides, but it's a challenging negotiation.
Right. And finally, how soon do you expect both Prime Minister Modi and President Trump to have a phone call or meet in person, considering that there is now positive momentum and there seems to be a deliberate attempt by both sides to put the relationship on track and the trade negotiations on track and show the world that India and US are still united on larger issues?
Well, I have no idea when that phone call might take place. I mean, as I think you know well, I've been advocating even before July 30th that the two leaders talked, that it would be necessary to have some breakthroughs on the trade front. I think the president, in his comments last weekend, referred to looking forward to having a conversation with Prime Minister Modi and doing that soon. It should be sooner than later. That's clear. If there's going to be progress, if there's a real prospect of concluding a trade agreement soon, I think that conversation should happen as soon as possible.
All right. Thank you very much, Mark Linscott, for joining us with your view on very important trade negotiations taking place in Delhi. The good thing is both sides calling it positive, saying that they are moving things forward. Let's see how the trade negotiations go and whether we have a deal before the end of this year. We are going to take a short break here on Global Lens, but we put the spotlight on India-Israel trade ties with Israeli Ambassador to India, Reuven Azar, on the other side. Welcome back to Global Lens. Israel has launched the main stage of its ground offensive by entering Gaza City. In a social media post, Defense Minister of Israel said that Gaza is burning, adding that the IDF is fighting to secure the release of hostages and the defeat of the Hamas. This comes days after Israel bombed Qatar in an attempt to target the Hamas leadership. The attack drew condemnation from around the world, including Arab nations, which described it as an unprecedented escalation by Israel. While Israel deepens its crackdown on Hamas, it is also working on deepening business ties with India. Israel's finance minister visited India last week, accompanied by the ministry's chief economist and other senior officials. They also met Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman and signed a bilateral investment agreement to facilitate reciprocal investments with the focus on technology and infrastructure. The treaty also paves the way for a potential free trade agreement. Currently, bilateral investments stand at $800 million. India is Israel's second largest country partner in Asia for merchandise trade. Bilateral trade between the two stood at $3.75 billion in FY25. I caught up with Reuven Azar, Israeli ambassador to India, who said that Israel would issue $200 billion worth of infrastructure projects over the next 10 years and wanted Indian companies to compete for those tenders. Take a look.
This is a landmark, and it's a very good signal to our private sectors. We have been sort of driving a dirt road, and we need to pave a highway to make business work in the most comfortable way that they can. And for that, we needed this investment treaty that fortunately came to a good conclusion as a result of a lot of goodwill and willingness to bridge the gaps just when the finance minister arrived. We want to do a trade deal, and we need to streamline the financial transactions between our countries because they are too cumbersome. So the Minister of Finance came with a very senior and wide delegation. The Director General of the Finance Ministry, which is the most powerful ministry in our system, our Accountant General, who is in charge of all the infrastructure projects. We're going to issue, Parikshit, in the next 10 years, $200 billion worth of infrastructure projects in Israel. And we want to attract Indian companies. You have very good companies here that are building your country in a very speedy pace, and they have developed the capabilities to deliver projects at world standard. And we want them in our system. We want them to compete in our international tenders. So we are doing an effort, and that's part of the effort. We also brought our chief economist, who, under his supervision, this investment treaty was signed. We brought a representative of our central bank. Our central bank has been, our banking system has been pretty conservative. And we have watched the digital revolution in this country. We want to see a situation in which it's much easier, not only for companies, but also for tourists and for citizens to transfer money. So yes, we are contemplating the adoption of UPI in the coming year. I hope it happens. We're going to put pressure on the central bank to try to make it happen. We want a vehicle that would make it easier for companies to execute transactions, because today it takes too long, it's too costly. So we put our people in contact with your finance ministry, the Department for Financial Services, in order to try to sort that out. In addition to that, the minister came with the head of our stock exchange, and he held meetings in Mumbai. We have institutional investors, Parikshit, the biggest players in the Israeli market, that have shown a lot of interest in the Indian market, but the procedure to purchase stakes in Indian companies is too cumbersome. So we want to, they had meetings both with the central bank and with SEBI. Right. We want to create a situation in which it's much easier for Israeli companies, and especially institutional investors, to invest in India. Now, there's in parallel another trend of increasing interest of Indian companies in the Israeli market, in terms of not only infrastructure, but also high-tech. Because from the moment that India decided to expand its interest beyond the local economy and become a player around the world, the increase in competitive is something that is completely essential if you want to achieve what you want in the outside markets. And therefore, this relationship is becoming important. Israel is the biggest innovation hub outside the United States. And that means that Indian companies can scout for technologies. So one example happened about 2 or 3 months ago when Amber, the big company that's doing here the air condition and other electronic appliances, purchased a majority stake in a company in Israel called Unitronics, which is not only going to contribute to the upgrade of the produce here in India, but also to get to Western markets, in which Unitronics is already present, like the United States and Europe. So there's a very vast agenda, and I'm very happy that this visit came into fruition.
Now, to speak to you about the opportunity for Indian infrastructure companies, maybe collaboration with the Delhi Metro, for example. Is this something that is being considered, maybe to replicate what the Delhi Metro has done here and do the same in Israel?
Absolutely. So what we had, I'll just tell you, in the last 2 weeks, we had a delegation from our National Transport Authority. That's the authority that is actually supervising and building all our light train and metro system in the greater Tel Aviv area. So just to give you the figures, only the greater Tel Aviv metro project is going to cost something like $40 to $50 billion, okay? We saw what DMRC has done here. We brought NTA here and they met with 7 or 8 companies. They spent at least 3 or 4 hours with each company, not only to understand what these companies are capable of, not only just to visit the facilities, but also to see what are the things that we should adapt in our tendering process to make sure that Indian companies can enter and actually graduate the PQ process, the pre-qualification process. So the metro tenders are going to be out. The PQ is going to be out in October. We want the maximum quantity of Indian companies to apply, and the tender itself is going to be issued October next, October 26th. So we hope that when we reach the finish line, we will have the highest number of Indian companies possible, so we can have a diversity and we have real competition, because it's money that is coming from the Israeli taxpayer. The question is who is going to get that money and who is capable of delivering the top-notch quality projects, and we saw that India is capable of doing that.
Speaking about collaboration payment systems, is there a collaboration with India's UPI being considered?
Yes. As I said before, this is the reason the finance minister came with the representative of the Bank of Israel. In Israel, we have a complete separation between the finance ministry and the bank and the central bank. The central bank is a completely independent regulator. But I think that they understand the importance of this relation, how it is growing in importance strategically, and they have decided to cooperate with the Ministry of Finance by sending a very senior representative. We had actually 2 meetings between him and the RBI, in which we presented a very long series of questions in order to understand how your system operates. He also met with the Financial Services Department at the Ministry of Finance, and the idea is to do all the preparations required for us to be able to adopt a vehicle that will make financial transactions more comfortable, not only for companies but also for individuals. So the projection in our eyes is to get UPI adopted in the coming year. I don't know how practical it is. We will have to dive into all the specifics of that, but we are not going to release our pressure as an embassy, of course, to make sure that this visit actually brings the fruit that we hoped it would bring.
Speaking about the situation in Gaza, now Israel has launched a ground offensive. Could you give us a sense of what Israel plans to achieve in this phase of the operation?
We have been very clear at the outset, following this atrocious attack on the 7th of October, that was the most terrible attack against Jews since the Holocaust. We were very clear. We said, we want to make sure that Hamas cannot rearm and regroup, and we want to bring back our hostages. We've been trying to achieve that through a combination of both military pressure and negotiations. And we've managed to retrieve 206 out of the 254 hostages. There are still 48 hostages in the Gaza Strip, 20 of them hopefully alive. We were hoping to have a deal about 2 months ago. And, you know, Hamas did this campaign of starvation. They retracted from agreement and unfortunately, you know, they haven't been pushed by the Qataris and by others to accept this deal. So we are finding ourselves in a situation in which this war is prolonging itself because Hamas is not ready to give up its arms and to leave the Gaza Strip. So Israel has embarked in this operation to take control of Gaza City, which remains the main stronghold of Hamas. And we are hoping that following this operation, to which we have been preparing for a month, because we had to make sure not only that we have good operational plans, but also that we can create a humanitarian mechanism to allow the population to evacuate the city of Gaza into places in which they will receive water and medical treatment and food, okay? This is an effort that is ongoing. We already managed to evacuate about 350,000 people from Gaza City. There's a lot to do ahead. We started the operation, and probably it's going to take more weeks until we achieve complete control of Gaza City. Once that is done, either Hamas is going to accept the situation that they have been refusing to accept, in which they have been defeated, and they have to give up control of the Gaza Strip, or Israel will have to remain there and actually take complete control of the Gaza Strip, okay, to create a better future for Gaza, to make sure that the international community can engage with a more moderate Palestinian leadership that actually will secure a path for the ending of the suffering of the Palestinian population.
Right.
You know, they have been taken hostage by Hamas too, and we have to make sure that they can be relieved of that, because if they don't, not only that Israel will suffer again from a similar threat in the future that will force us to invade again the Gaza Strip, but also it will be impossible for the international community to engage in a serious, let's say, endeavor to give relief and reconstruction to the people of Gaza.
Hi, Master. Also, after the attack on a Hamas site in Qatar, the Arab League has come out with some very strong statements against Israel. How do you respond to that? And will there be further strikes on other places in the Middle East in case there are Hamas sites over there?
Well, first of all, we have determined, and this, by the way, backed by international law. There is a resolution 1373 of the UN Security Council that states very clearly that it is forbidden for countries to harbor terrorists. So what Qatar has been doing has been in breach of international law. Now, we were ready to tolerate that as long as we believe that Qatar actually is doing an effort to bring a deal, is doing an effort to promote peace. But what we found out a couple of months ago is that they are doing exactly the opposite. What they're trying to do is create a pathway for Hamas to remain in power in the Gaza Strip. This is something that we cannot tolerate. And we decided to take action because the alternative of failing to pressurize the leadership of Hamas in Qatar is the prolongation of the war. Everybody wants the war to end. But if you have these fat cats in Doha staying at 5-star hotels without any pressure whatsoever, how can this war come to an end? So people have to stop being hypocritical. You know, I heard that in certain places, including in Washington when there was this big Middle East event, you know, although Arab representatives were officially condemning us, they were also very happy that finally the Qataris are accountable for what their double game that they are playing. Because they've been doing this not only vis-a-vis Israel, they've been doing this vis-a-vis UAE and Saudi Arabia. And if you remember, Parikshit, there was a big spat between these countries until not very long ago. What they've been doing to Egypt, you know, instigating instability all around the Middle East, promoting the jihadi agenda in the West, in Europe, in American universities. This has to stop. If we want to have stability in our region, these double games and this hypocrisy has to stop. So, okay, Israel was condemned, but at the end of the day, we did the right thing. Either the Qataris play fair, and if they play unfair, then we are going to hold them accountable for the criminals they are, for harboring terrorists in their country.
That's a wrap on another edition of Global Lens. Goodbye and many thanks for watching.